Hi, I'm Jason Gore for ThatShelf.com, and we're here to look at some cables from Cardas Audio.
Shelf.
So Cardas Audio is one of these high-end cable companies that audiophiles go on about. And I'm going to sort of open up a little bit of a can of worms here. I've said this before in sort of my own journey in building up my system, that there's some people that really enjoy upgrading their system and really finding ways of doing it. I'm somebody that has tried at every stage to only get stuff that for me actually betters what it is for the kind of stuff I listen to. I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. I was at an audio show listening to $60,000, $70,000 speakers and several, probably $150,000 setup. And one of the people at the Toronto Audio Show, and one of the people there actually gave me access to the title. And I was listening to Thunder Road by Springsteen. Amazing album. One of the greatest songs, Born to Run, incredible album, one of the greatest songs ever. But certainly it's not Steely Dan Asia, let alone Diana Krall or, that stupid sort of ping pong song that you hear at audio shows a lot. Something that sounds good on anything. And one of the things about something like Thunder Road, it was recorded by an artist, Bruce Springsteen, in not the best studio in the world, in this thing in Jersey. They were trying to get the stuff together. He wanted it to sound very much like stuff from the 50s and 60s, the sort of Phil Spector sound. And so it has a very particular, very rock and roll, almost mono sound that he wanted. The piano sounds like how they wanted. It was engineered like they wanted. It sounded like what they wanted. But what it does not do is make your system shine just by itself. You take something like, look, one of my favorite records, absolutely, it's up there, somewhere up here, Harry Belafonte live at Carnegie Hall. You play it on a plastic cartridge, and it sounds incredible. I mean, it's just the like, you can have the worst possible setup, and the album sounds amazing, and then the higher end setup you get, it still sounds amazing, but does it sound more amazing? Yeah, of course it does, but it's like it already sounded really good, and now it just sounds gooder. Whereas it's interesting, the higher end you get on some of these elements, with some of these records, stuff actually sounds worse. A really good example, actually, is Jesus Christ Superstar Nerd, is that the movie version of Jesus Christ Superstar, the actual blue version of the record, gets so much muddier. The more revealing my system is, the worse some records sound. That is a weird thing, but it is just part of the fun. That you're actually, in the same way you're able to hear something that sounded pretty good now sound amazing, and there's a bunch of records like that, Joni Mitchell being a really good example. You listen to something like Blue, which sounds really good on everything, but it's transcendent when you have something that isn't shrill, that is bringing out all the mid-ranges, doing all that stuff. There's a lot going on. And then you have something like, again, that Jesus Christ Superstar record, where the better your system is, the more you realize that their album itself is not particularly well done. Speakers play an incredibly important role, almost a definitively important role, but not just speakers themselves, speaker placement, where you're sitting, where it all works out. I've spent years and years and years getting my system dialed in. Amplification, I just want to have enough oomph. One of the reasons I went with the monoblocks that I had is because I had originally a 7.1 200 watt a channel monster thing, Earthquake Citanova, and it just was not being able to handle my B&W 802s, rightly or wrongly. So I went with 300 watt monoblocks from Class A, the same similar company that's actually associated with that, and that's what's driving my 2-channel. And then I now have other amplifiers that are running the rest of my 5-channel, my 7.1 bed, and then I have 2 additional amplifiers that are doing my 7.1.4, my Atmos, my 0.4, and soon to be my 0.6. Look for a video on that coming up. Everything that I have, I'm running balanced cables. I'm running XLR cables, and anybody who works at a studio knows that just regular cable runs, or you just need to have decent. The whole reason you go with balance is you don't have to go crazy with cables. Certainly insulation for stuff like RCA and stuff like that, or the micro signals that are coming off of your turntable, always made sense to have better, coax insulated cables, whatever, or like decent RCA cables to actually avoid different interference. But the whole point of balanced is that it should just be signal with noise being removed through phase cancellation, etc. That being said, your system, at its best is synergistic, and that is a weird word, and it's one that's used all the time by a bunch of audio nerds, but really just means that everything's gonna kind of have to work together. I don't have everything all being from one brand. I don't have all that. I have a nice mix of stuff, but for me to get stuff sounding the way that I want it to be sounding, I've sort of gone up. For my long runs from my, I have a 25-foot run. At the moment, I'm just running just a regular, essentially decent $40-50 cable that runs from my preamp out into my main 2-channel system, because frankly that's all I have needed to date. I may be upgrading those to something a little bit more. We're in discussions to do that, but for right now that's what I have running. But for my short runs, ridiculously, where things can actually hypothetically make a change is where they're actually generally sensitive, and I have 2 areas where that actually matters. I have my phono preamp, my Avid phono preamp, has XLR going from there into my Class A CP700, which is my analog front end, my preamp. So it is. So I have a short cable that's going from my phono preamp into my regular preamp, and then I have a long cable, which is a regular mic cable, that's going from that Class A into my main channels. And then I have my AVM90, my sort of home theater amp, and I have all of the rest of the channels sort of going directly into the various amps, but I actually have a bypass cable. I have a cable going from my Anthem AVM90 that goes from the AVM90 up to the Class A, input it at Class A. What you do in the Class A is you mark it SSP, so signal, surround signal processor, is basically how they had it. And that becomes my 2-channel home theater bypass. This is one of the reasons I got the Class A. Plus, it can speak to my amps and do all kinds of fancy things using their Class A link. It's a beautiful piece of equipment, something that when it was new was tens of thousands of dollars to get all of this stuff. I bought it used many years later, and it's being an amazing, amazing front end. When I listen to vinyl, I only have the Class A on. I have nothing going through the Anthem, and when I listen to surround music or movies or whatever, the Anthem is then on. Then that 2-channel, the left and right from the Anthem, goes into the Class A, the volume is disabled, and the signal just passes through as quickly as possible. So there's 2 real short runs there. There's the phono preamp into the preamp, and then there's the digital preamp into the other preamp, and that's 2 runs of XLR that I have. Foot and a half is all I really need. I could get away with almost anything. I was running, again, my regular mic cables. I gave a shot with the SVS cables. Those seemed a little bit of upgrade. I had a set of cables from the same people that I used to have with my my actual speaker, which are the Acoustic Zen XLRs. So put those in, and it was actually interesting. The least satisfying cables I had were the Acoustic Zen. They really seemed to cloud the sound. I was very surprised and annoyed, because they are obviously very, very expensive. I happen to have them sort of on loan, but they just didn't work in my system. It's that. They might be amazing cables, might spec well, but they just didn't work in my system. But what was annoying, and I pointed out the fact that it is annoying, is that there was a goddamn difference. I don't want there to be a difference. I generally and actively don't want there to be a difference. I go out of my way to avoid there being difference. I want the system to be such that whatever cable I plug in, everything else, the speakers are doing all the heavy lifting, the turntable's doing, like, everything's dialed in, and the actual XLR, it shouldn't matter. And yet, super annoyingly, it does. You can talk about cable impedance, you can talk about the actual construction, you can talk about what it's doing to shape the sound, etc., etc., etc. But I can, on my system, hear, in sometimes subtle ways and sometimes ridiculously and preposterously overt ways that are so overt that I'm annoyed. I'm not pleased by this. I'm not like fooling myself like, oh my God, I want there to be no difference. I want any upgrade I do, whatever money I spend, I want to hear zero difference between my gazillion-dollar cable and my not gazillion-dollar cable, because then I know I can stop. And I can't, because I keep hearing stuff that does improve the system. And given the fact that this is my baby, this is where I spend my time, my pleasure, this is the heart, this brings me so much joy. While I can, while my ears are still working and while my heart keeps beating, I am enjoying music and movies in a way that fills me with utmost pleasure. And if I can do something that is within my means, or at least stretching my means, but not so preposterously in my means, I've already renovated a house to make this room a little bit better. I can't move to a giant space as much as I want. Nothing would make me happier than, I mean, my ceiling here is 6.5 feet. I would love cathedral ceilings. I would love this space. I would love to have a separate 2-channel and surround room. I would love all this stuff. I have to be realistic. But if it's a matter of that, I got another pair of XLR cables that make things sound a little bit better. Maybe it's not such an end of the world in order to do that, and I can simply suck up the fact that it cost me a bunch of money I don't really have. I had a very good friend of mine, Shane, come over, who has immaculate ears. He's been a musician for years. He has incredible ears, and I trust his ears in many ways even more than mine, because I know what I'm doing when I'm rewiring it. And I'm like, am I hearing something that I'm not hearing? And we spent a considerable amount of time trying out different cables, doing this. My regular stuff, and we did it with my speaker cables, and then we did it with the XLR cables. And we found on my system, on my setup, my upgrade to Cardas really did make a change. Not only did it make a change of all the variations, like do you like 1, do you like 2, do you like 3? The one that we picked consistently, despite me sort of, blind testing, trying to fool them, but, not making a change and seeing, like, doing that sort of thing, stuff you do. Not quite a scientific A/B test in the deepest sense, but, as close as we're going to get while still enjoying, while still listening to stuff, while listening to a variety of music. What I found on my system were these guys. And I have found that they just work. They just open stuff up. This is total overkill. On the phono system where I'm really doing critical listening, it really has improved my record listening experience now in ways that I find really pleasing. Again, you have such a tiny signal going from my moving coil out of the turntable, but that phono preamp is doing so much work to get it up to a line level for the regular preamp that cabling really seems to make a difference for me. So as it says in here, what do I have? I have a pair of XLR 1 meter or 3 feet. And this is what I look for. I'll sort of cover up my serial number, but I have a certificate of authenticity. I mean, it's weird. When you're buying this stuff, you can absolutely go on Alibaba and buy $30 versions of these cables that look almost identical. You can send into Cardas and actually get them to verify whether or not these were sort of legitimate. In this case, what I did was actually call them, and they were actually quite kind and said, here's the serial number, what were they associated with? They were associated with this cable. So I figured if somebody has actually completely ripped me off, bought these on Canuck Audio Mart from a sort of a person who themselves are an authorized dealer, clearly trade-in model. And so, yeah, these are real. I mean, they're just going to be real simply as that. Here's a note from Angela Cardas, daughter of the founder. And it shows off a little bit of their crazy construction. Now, there's a little bit of weird magic and sort of home theater / audiophile nonsense involved here. But there's also, I mean, you want to say on a sort of deeper level, a bunch of science, right? As I said, Cardas cable are built in sections, beginning with the building of the copper wire into multi-stranded conductors. The conductors are then insulated and bundled with other components such as LDPE, anti-static air tubes, drain wires, PTFE tape, and shielding. Each step requires a pass-through, customized braiding cabling, and jacketing machines, with some cables taking over 70 steps to complete. At the heart of the Cardas cable is their ultra-pure Cardas copper, mined in the U.S. Southwest and processed in the Northeast. We employ proprietary drawing and annealing techniques to produce the highest quality, purest copper strands. Cardas copper is used by other high-end audio manufacturers in scientific applications. I mean, that's true. Copper now is a pain in the butt to actually get decent, non-adulterated, non-recycled, pure mined copper, and hypothetically, the better and cleaner the copper itself is, the better you're going to get. Does it work? Seems to in this case for me. My ears tell me that it is. Here's my receipt. Here's what do we have here. All right, so there's the boutique where I got it. Shout out to these guys. This is it. There's cables. They're just XLR cables, but they're very pretty XLR cables, aren't they? I mean, these are crazy. And because it's Cardas, you can actually buy these and actually build your own cables with these. And anybody who's familiar with, the Neutrik or whatever ends, you can see these ends are just, I think it's beryllium on the outside, along with the brass gold mix. Who knows? But they're very secure. There's an incredibly pleasing insert when they're there. You can read into the Freudian implications of that. But this is it. It's just it's a blue wire with a bunch of cable ends on it. It should be nothing. It should be a $10 cable. It's not a $10 cable. I have here, so when I actually called up Cardas, I actually asked them, I'm like, hey, I'm reviewing this stuff. I want to talk about it. On their website, they don't actually have very much in terms of the way of, let's call them statistics, the sort of nitty-gritty. And it doesn't mean that the numbers themselves determine necessarily the sound. You could have two things that measure the same and can sound radically different. It all depends what you're measuring, how you're measuring, what the actual implications are, and all that kind of stuff. I've already said that I've had these cables in my system and I know that they sound better. In this case, I'm sort of closing a loop. I highly, highly, highly doubt I'm going to actually hear a major difference between it going from my digital preamp into the preamp. There's so much other stuff going on there. And yet it's just going to make me feel better to the fact that everywhere I can have these Cardas XLRs, I have Cardas XLRs. Simple as that. But the fact of the matter is that they actually asked them for if there's any sort of literature that actually speaks about what these cables do slightly different than others do. And they flat out said no. They said they sound like this. You want to measure them? Go ahead and measure them. But Cardas was unwilling to supply me any of the stuff. I have found on other sites where they actually they retail the things for ungodly amounts of money. This is the Clear Rev 1, so this is the sort of latest version they have. It is the continuation of, so this is actually from Cardas themselves. George Cardas' later pursuit of perfection, back in the late George. A continuation of pursuit for perfection clears the geometry of a golden reference interconnect by highly refined, current state-of-the-art dielectrics and metallurgy, marries the two with ultra-fine stranded tubular conductor, etc., etc. So this is where, you can see the shell on here. That's where the golden reference stuff comes through. It's basically using almost, I don't know, like tarot card kind of reading nonsense to actually do certain ratios of the way that the stuff works. It is deep in nature. That's why it's all part of the logo. I can be as cynical about that as possible. Frankly, I think it probably has less to do with the way the ratio is than to do things like actual proper dielectrics, proper air gap spacing, etc., to avoid as much compromise of the signal as possible. It's already balanced. It's already doing a pretty decent job of actually avoiding crosstalk and all the other elements that you can actually get into. But inevitably, because we talk about synergy, it's not just how everything works. It's like amplifier it's like a suck and a blow at the same time. It seems very weird. It's like everything, it's not just like, it's not like a river that the water's going from point A to point B. There's all kinds of interaction between when you're sending a signal and the stuff is actually coming back into the system and how the system deals with it. It's all this crazy, complicated stuff that I know microscopic amounts of, and electrical engineers have a difficult time actually articulating everything that's going on in terms of the fact that electricity is actually going the outside, what's actually being what the flow rate is, and all of that stuff. But people talk about capacitance, impedance, and all that stuff. So this is how it works. The outside diameter is 0.4. Dielectric type, it's Teflon, so it's actually Teflon in it with that air gap. The XLR capacitance is 8 picofarads per foot, picofarads per foot, so picofarads square, I guess. And then they're 25.5 average AWG each cable, and they're the 100% spiral with Teflon graphite composite, and the conductor is a match propagation, golden ratio, constant Q, crossfield, pure copper, and Litz. I don't know. Many people, feel free to let me know in the comments, A, I'm an idiot spending this much money on cables, and B, whether this stuff is just audiophile gobbledygook. All I know is that on my setup, when I plug these in, stuff sounded better. It just opens stuff up. All the adjectives, all the descriptions that we have, It was airier. It was roomier. The bass sounded tight. Whatever it is. It just did. And when I went back on the same cables and listened and sort of acclimated, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm crazy. This sounds great. System sounds great. That's it. You put it on the other cables, things sound great. And then you put these back in, you're like, ah, crap, these sound better. I am not happy about buying these. I am happy I have them. This is my look at Cardas, these crazy XLRs. I'm going to put them in my system, and I'm just going to enjoy that they're there. They're going to look pretty, and I'm not going to see them. The blue is very satisfying. It's going to sit behind my cabinet. They're going to plug in, and I know they're not going to go anywhere because the connectors are very, very strong. But for those of us that are in the privileged position to be able to have a system that is as revealing that you make a change of a little bit of wiring, you can use some really great stuff. I am super, super happy to have these. Now all I have to think about is how to get a 25-foot run and then change different speaker cabling and then maybe upgrade my phono. It's a never-ending quest. But for right now, I'm going to listen to these and I'm going to be happy. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, follow us on social media, ring the bell. Please spread the word so I can afford these one day. And let us know in the comments what you actually think about these kind of cables, whether you've experienced them, whether or not, again, from your experience, absolutely you make changes and you're like, you're ridiculous, or whether or not sometimes you put cables like this, like I did with the acoustic sounds, and things actually get worse. I would love to hear your stories. Thank you again so much for the support you have for this channel, and we will see you next video. All the best. Take care.